I love to search the scriptures, as many of you know, and today is no different. Today is a special day. We have navigated James for now 3 weeks. This is our 4th week. And if you're coming for the first time, maybe middle of the movie, 3/4 of the movie into the conversation, I want to remind you why we chose James. And one of the reasons why we are navigating this book. This is a book that was written by Jesus' little brother. So this guy grew up with Jesus. It took a while before he actually became a follower of Jesus. He did not become a follower of Jesus while Jesus was on earth. So it was after the matter that he followed Jesus. But as he follows Jesus, he finds himself in a generation where his brothers, his generation, a bunch of Jewish people and non-Jewish people, they're going to be scattered through the known world. And it's scattered because of persecution, because of confusion, because of exiles, because of oppression. So James writes to a bunch of people who are not supposed to be in these places across the world, the known world. They're supposed to be back in Jerusalem. And James himself, as a brother of Jesus, he ends up being a leader or a pastor, an elder of the church in Jerusalem. So he's kind of at the headquarters, and he's writing this letter to a bunch of Christians across the known world. And the context of the writing has to do with the title of our conversation. You see your handouts, you see the screen, and the purpose of this is to find out, to see what James has to say when life is not adding up. Everybody comes to this world with preconceived ideas, with understandings. You're a Christian because you believe specific things that are supposed to happen as a Christian, but many times life is not really making sense. So what do? Well, many times life looks like this Rubik's Cube on screen. And we brought this on a stage to remind you that for many of us, the outcome it's pretty obvious. We're supposed to know when we came into the marriage deal. We're supposed to know what we did when we signed up for our freshman year in high school, or maybe our second year in college. When you got the job, you know exactly how this was supposed to look like. But for many of us, and the audience of James is exactly the same, they knew what it was supposed to look like. But in reality, life looks like this. It's not making sense. And if you're like me, you can try to make sense of life and hopefully get to where you're supposed to get, but I've never done it. I've tried that thing, and I tried multiple times in multiple seasons in my life, and it's just not working. So for some of us, we're coming back to church with the hope to move from there relationally to this, maybe in marriage. Some of us, we have been in this condition for the last 7 years financially, and now that we're trying to do life right, we're trying to get a budget, you're expecting for finances to look like this. Well, what do you do when things are not looking the way you expect them to look? Well, on week 1, just to give you a quick reminder, one of the reasons why life looks like discrepancy in life, and it's not making sense, is so you, as a follower of Jesus, can be found not in a better condition, not in a perfect marriage, not in a perfect health condition, but that you can be found, regardless of the situation, you can be found mature, and you can be found complete. And let me put it to you very simple. Jesus died in this world, on a cross, not exclusively, so you can go to heaven. He died so while you are on earth, your life looks mature and looks complete. That's the purpose. So if your life is not looking mature and complete, if my life is looking exactly the opposite of verse 4, chapter 1, verse 4, we have a serious problem. Now, what's the problem? Here's the problem. Here's where we said for 3 weeks. We explain that the purpose of Jesus' death is not that you can avoid the battlefield. It's not that you can avoid problems or craziness or brokenness. What's the purpose? To be found complete and mature. So as you walk into the battlefield, Jesus died. So through his completion, his work, his sacrifice, his holiness, his righteousness, his ability to satisfy the Father, now you have the ability in you to be found equipped into the battlefield. Anytime that you move away from Jesus, your tendency is going to be to avoid the battlefield. That's not Christianity. You were not created to avoid the battlefield. You were created to be in a world that does not know you. A world that doesn't belong to you, that you don't belong to them. We are in the world, but we do not belong to the world. So part of that experience is that at the end of the journey, as you walk with a full equipment, as you face reality of life, you have to remind yourself that the purpose is that you will not lack anything. This is verse 4 from week 1, that you will lack nothing. What does that mean? See, this is how you know when you lack nothing. See, I'm not saying that you will change your circumstances. This is what we're saying, that as you are mature, as you are complete, as you are found righteous before God through Jesus Christ, and you lack nothing, is ultimately tested by the way you look at the needs of others. So I'm going to reverse the conversation. One of the evidences of someone who is not complete, who is not mature, is a person that complains that he's not being picked up. Is a person that is tired of just waiting for someone to pick him up. Maybe you're in this place today and you are not feeling the love or the encouragement from others. See, this is the purpose of your completeness. It's not that you can avoid the battlefield, but that you are an instrument of helping others. Sharing the load with others instead of becoming the opposite. Now, this ultimately, James brings us into the conversation, and he says on verse 5, this is what he says on verse 5. He says, if any of you lack completion, fullness, if any of you are in a condition that you're not able to carry the load of others, then what you ultimately lack is wisdom. That's what you lack. The issue is wisdom. In other words, a wise person is a person that understands that this is the purpose of your life. This is the purpose of why you've been saved. That's exactly why you are a follower of Jesus. That's wisdom. See, a wise person is a person that does not avoid the battlefield. But as you face the reality of brokenness and trouble and dissolution and betrayal, whatever the case may be, you understand that the job of wisdom in your life, wisdom is the ability to be found complete and to be found equipped for the battle. So James portrays this experience of wisdom, because again, this is verse 5 from week 2. We understand that this wisdom that potentially some people were lacking in the church in the first century, this is the experience that we go back into Old Testament and you look at the book of Proverbs. See, Proverbs in the Old Testament is wisdom literature. Wisdom is presented in Proverbs as a person, not just as a concept. Now, this is important for us to understand because the audience, see, James is writing to an audience that they embrace a Jewish mind. The problem with the Jewish mind is that these Jewish people, as I told you earlier, they have been scattered. So now they are having children in other countries that they're not Jewish. They are going through interracial marriages. So now they're not just Jewish, they're Jewish and something else, they're kids. So the unstoppable force in this time in history that is sweeping across is the mind from the Greeks. And the Greeks always believed that the spiritual is important, but it has nothing to do with the physical. So as long as you believe right, it doesn't matter how you behave. So your doctrine, your theology, what you believe of God, is no problem if it's not reflected on your ethics or your behavior. That's what the Greeks believed. So when you see this concept of wisdom, is the integration, the marriage, once again, of thinking right and behaving right. It's understanding that what you believe ultimately is reflected on how you behave. That's what happens. So what we discover, and again, in a time of many trials and tribulations, wisdom on week 2 help us to understand the difference between temptation and test. This is important because both of them are, I will probably argue this all day long with you. Wisdom, see, the challenge with testing and the challenge with temptation is that I feel sometimes that the pain is exactly the same. It's difficult to go through a test. It's difficult to be tempted. The difference is that temptation comes from the evil one, because God cannot tempt you. He cannot be tempted. God may allow you to be tempted, but the challenge is to know the difference. What's the difference between when it's coming from the enemy or it's coming from God? Because they both will work on you. And the thing is that when it's temptation, it's for the purpose of destruction, right? it's destruction. And when it comes to testing, it's for the purpose of upbuilding you. It's bringing you into, again, into completion and maturity, that you will lack absolutely nothing. So the more that you are tested, the more that you are brought into Christ's likeness, the more you're going to be able to carry people's load versus making yourself the victim. Well, this ultimately came into week 2 as understanding that temptation, as real as it is, as destructive as it is, temptation is an external manifestation. The beauty of this external manifestation is that it depends, look at me, wholeheartedly on an internal decision. You can never, as a Christian, if you're a follower of Christ, you cannot continue make excuses of what happened to you when you were 5 or 7 or any other experience. You cannot blame it on circumstances, on how you are making decisions. See, wisdom is making decisions through the lenses of the one that has complete you, mature you, the one that lacks absolutely nothing. So this wisdom is reflected again on understanding the external and the internal components of this lifestyle. Today, I want you to go to verse number 19. Can you please do that with me? Go chapter 1, book of James, verse 19. Because on verse 19, we began to see the end result, the dissecting of this internal decision. We talk about the external is bad. For these people in history, it's not going to get any better. For these people in history, specifically James eventually is going to be stoned to death. History says, by his very own people. Just the way they killed the big brother Jesus, they're going to kill the little brother also. And for the exception, with the exception of John the beloved disciple, every one of the disciples are going to be eventually, executed. So circumstances are they're not going to look better. And I don't want to sound pessimistic, but this internal decision, well, what are we supposed to do with it? Well, here we go. That's what we do with it. We began this morning by embracing, once again, the reality that James is speaking to convert Jews, convert Gentiles. He's speaking to the church and says, my brothers, dear brothers and my dear sisters, here is what I want you to know as you look into the internal decision based on the external manifestations or circumstances. You have to take note of this. And if you're like me, I want to know what the this is. I'm all for the this. James, what is it? It's wisdom. That's what we've been talking about, right? We've been bringing this whole thing on wisdom and wisdom. So once again, what is wisdom? Can I just put it to you simple? As simple as I can do it. Because we said that wisdom is a person. And wisdom, based on John 1:1, that the Word was with God. The Word was, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We understand that this person is Jesus. So that this is the gospel, is Jesus. What does that mean? Please look at me. It implies that Jesus is a person you welcome. Jesus is a person not only you welcome, but now you have to embrace, or you have to believe, or you have to receive the truths that this person by the name of Jesus said about himself. What does that mean? That means that your opinion, my opinion about Jesus are secondary. I'm going to say that again. What he said about himself is the most important thing. So as long as your opinion of Jesus agrees with his opinion about himself, you're good to go. But if your opinion deviates from what he said about himself, I'm wrong. You're wrong. So you welcome the person, you agree to what he said about himself, and the last one, you embrace his lifestyle. Now your worldview is filtered through the person of Jesus. That's the this. So anytime that you embrace the gospel, anytime that you look at the perfect one, not because your faith is perfect, but because he is perfect. So he takes your broken faith, your broken limitations, your broken history, my dark past experiences, and once I place them in Jesus, by welcoming Jesus, by believing what he said about himself, even though things look very different, and as long as I embrace this lifestyle, look at the manifestation of this wisdom. You will become a person that will be quick to listen, and you're going to become very slow to speak. So let me reverse this statement for you. Anybody that disregards wisdom, anybody that instead of welcoming the person, you try to make the person whatever you want. Anybody that disregards the gospel is somebody who is very quick to speak and is very slow to hear. Is everybody tracking on what's happening here? That's the gospel. One of the manifestations of the gospel is that you, not on your own, not because you're better, not because you learned your lesson in the previous marriage, now you become a person that is very quick to listen and is slow to speak. Why is this important? Because at the end of this beautiful combination of quickness to listen and slowness to speak, the byproduct is that you become very slow to become angry. Angry. It seems to me, based on what we're reading, that in the churches in this time in history, there was an anger issue. Now, if you're a Jew and you're oppressed by Roman government, I think you'll be angry. I'll be angry. If you abuse my family, if you touch my kids, is everybody tracking on this? It's hundreds of years of abuse, and it's like, what's up with all this? So there's an anger coming into the life of these Christians, and James says, if you have found that this, the gospel, then you're going to become very, very fast, very, very quick to listen, very slow to speak, because at the end, here's the importance of anger. Because anger, human anger, does not produce the righteousness that God desires. What does that mean? I want you to listen to me for a moment. When you embrace when you embrace the gospel, please listen, you embrace the gospel, Jesus himself is not simply your guaranteed entrance into heaven. I'm glad we're going to heaven. I'm looking forward to heaven. It's going to be good. But Jesus, what he does is he also restores what happened in the garden. See, in the garden, man, because of the lack of wisdom, man, instead of trusting God, they trust in themselves. They wanted to be like God. Okay? In the garden, man and God create a chasm. There was a distinction, a separation. So when Jesus comes into this world and he lives a perfect life, dies a perfect death, okay, and then rises from the dead, he not only creates a bright future for you, but he restores the past. Why am I bringing this up to you? Because if you are a follower of Jesus, that means for the first time you are fully human. What does that mean? That if you're fully human, you are going to be able to express the emotions of humanity. And one of the emotions of humans is anger. So listen to what I'm saying to you. Anger is not a sin, but anger is probably the number one emotion that Satan uses to destroy you. That's the issue. Anger potentially is the one single element in your life and my life that moves you away from the purpose of wisdom. See, wisdom is not simply so you can stop being a fool. That's not the purpose of wisdom. Wisdom is not so you can just be a better Christian, a better father, a better worker, a better whatever. All those things are important, and I'm glad that you can improve your condition. Wisdom is about understanding that the purpose of me welcoming the person, the purpose of me believing what he said about himself, and the purpose of me to try to do what I'm supposed to do on walking in Christ's likeness. See, the purpose is so that I can produce the righteousness that God desires in a non-righteous context. That's the purpose of wisdom. So God never promised that if you come to him, your circumstances will be righteous. This is why I am so against delayed marriages. You singles waiting for the right person that God is going to send you. It does not exist. It does not exist. It does not exist. Can you? It does not exist. I'm just telling you right now, stop waiting. Stop just, fantasizing and mesmerizing and just hoping. And then here's the crazy for me. I'm praying for the one. It does not exist, bro. It does not exist. I'm just telling you right now, it does not exist. So what does that mean? That implies, once again, that the purpose is for me to live a life that brings and produces the righteousness that God desires. So again, if you move this in the opposite direction, if you are a person, I'm a person that is driven by anger, which implies anger is the byproduct of being quick to listen, being quick to speak and slow to listen. That's the byproduct. Ultimately, you're creating what I'm asking you to do on your handouts to understand that the opposition, that the antidote, that the enemy of wisdom is not foolishness, it's anger. Anger is the one thing that will destroy producing what God calls you and equips you to produce. Now, with that being said, I got to move quick on this. Here is the therefore. Here is the, I love grammatical, sentences and structures. Look at this. English people, you, whoever, like all this craziness of the grammar. Therefore, if this is true, here's what it means. That means that if you are a person that has embraced the person, that has believed the truths about the person that he said about himself, and that you're willing to follow into his, lifestyle, then what you do, you get rid of all moral filth. Now, look at me for a moment. What James is not saying is if you become a wise person, if you are slow to speak and quick to listen, and if you avoid anger, what he's not saying is that hopefully you will never have any moral filth. What happens when you become a wise person and you make that internal, decision, you realize of your condition. See, these people were already living immorally, these Christians. So this whole thing is not just to avoid immorality, it's about getting rid of the immorality. What does that mean? That literally means in the language or in the mind of the Jewish people, this is the Hebrew mind, is to literally take something that you get rid of. That's what it means. You get rid of it. See, and this is why. Because it's evil and because it's so prevalent. Do I need to exemplify that one? Do I got to go into details what that means, evil, and how prevalent it is? See, he's saying get rid of it. You have to get rid of this. You have to understand that you cannot be a wise person and still dress in the same manner like someone who is quick to speak and is slow to listen. So if you want to have the welcoming of this individual, if you want to believe what he said about himself, and you want to emulate a lifestyle, you have to make a tangible decision that the prodigal son, remember the story, prodigal son in the Gospels, that he rebelled against the father and he says, give me my inheritance. He walks away, spends all of this in craziness like a fool. He was very quick to speak, very slow to listen, and he goes and wastes his life and his father's inheritance. And once he is at the deepest of craziness, the Bible says this, that he came to himself. Remember that? That's what I'm talking about. Coming to yourself is getting rid of what you're not supposed to have or possess, this craziness of life. And then he says this is what you do. You get rid of this, but then after that, you need to humbly, what do? Now you have to accept. So it seems to me that the language of James is that you get rid of one, and you have to put on a different one. You got to humbly accept the word planted in you. Because when you do and you combine both of these experiences, it's really symbolized with the beauty of these twin towers. It's the beauty of these two elements that together, look at what happens, that together they can save you. Is everybody tracking what's happening here? So the challenge for most of us is that we have done this. We did that in youth camp. We did that when we were 7. I don't know, whenever that happened in your life. But what James is implying, especially when it comes to these two pillars of the gospel that both can save you, is that getting rid of something and putting on humbly, putting on into this righteousness, into the person of Jesus, is that many of us, what we have done is we come back. So we're not going to hell. You see what I'm saying? We're not. We're saved. We just have moments where we just look weird. We just do things that is like, what's going on? Now, singles, can you please look at me for a moment? Singles. If you look like this as a single, you probably are going to marry someone like this as a single. Is that fair to say? Because my concern with singles, especially singles, is that you guys want to keep this lifestyle and pray for this dude. This is not going to happen because typically you attract who you are. Typically. That's how it works. You don't attract who you are not. You attract who you are. So what I'm asking you to do this morning is to look at these principles that one of them is the deliverance, but the other one is eternal life. So you need to have a deliver life. You need to be delivered. You need to put your trust in Jesus. You need to give your life to Jesus. You need to literally disregard and just put everything at the mercy of the cross and be forgiven. I have the impression and the image in my mind, because again, this is something that I struggle in my life many times, that some of us, we need to ask for forgiveness because we still don't believe that Jesus has forgiven us. We keep on bringing some, retake on some things that God has literally forgave us. And that's why when we are Christians, but we go like this through life. We want a casual Christianity. We try to become cool. So the old, it's not that I'm wearing it fully, but it's just like, I still have some issues that I'm a work in progress, bro. And here's the typical. Who are you to judge me? Have you heard that before? Only God can judge me. I'm like, really? Is that how it works? You're using this judgment of God to excuse the reality that you got to have both. See, because here's what's happening in the church in the first century. Theologically, doctrinally, they've been crushing this major doctrines of the scriptures. See, this is what happens when you and I try to do this. Instead of getting rid of it and we want to hang out to it, see, James basically says, this is what happens. When you do this, you deceive yourself because you settle by simply listening. You simply listen to the word instead of becoming what? A doer. Someone that wants to hang out to both end, someone that wants to become the exception to the rule, someone that wants to continue and basically, seek the Lord as long as the Lord does what I want him to do, then that's the moment where we literally are creating a deception of life. That's exactly why, man, this is hard to say, but the number one reason, based on studies, the number one reason unchurched people, and I'm describing some of our kids and grandkids that used to be in church. I'm describing your mama and maybe your grandmama that used to be in church before. Some of the reasons why people have left the church or they don't want nothing with the church is because they look at the church and they look at us and put us into this label of intolerant people. Intolerant. Now, that's a loaded statement, but all that I'm going to say is this. Here's the point. I want to make sure that we're not known as a church who knows the scriptures, but does the scriptures. It's not simply just knowing what is right, but it's acting on what we are called to be and do. So ultimately, here is what I want you to think of. This is how I want to illustrate this. Anybody knows what's happening on Tuesday, November 8th? Tuesday, November 8th. What's going on? Election day. Anybody that settles for listening instead of doing the Bible is the typical mindset that perpetuates the divorce of the sacred and the mundane. Is the typical Christian that looks at the spiritual matters as the priority and looks at the physical as secondary. Listen to me for a moment. I just told you, Jesus restored our relationship with creation at the cross. So how I behave is equally important as what I believe. What does that mean? Please listen to me. What that implies is when it comes to November 8th, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for, but I'm here to tell you that the scripture tells us how to vote for. How to go about voting. What does that mean? That implies, look at me for a moment. Don't get nervous. I'm not going to get into politics. Listen to me. Here's what I'm implying. Is stop looking at the White House and the government as just secular, as people who are going to hell, people who do not know Jesus. You used to be in that place before. Huh? You were not born wise or with wisdom. It was imputed in you. And the reason, I just told you, the reason why you are a Christian today is not to agree with the craziness of our government, but the reason is because you and I, we are here to display the righteousness of Christ. So what is not supposed to be redeemed or restored can be restored. So I believe the way this nation is going to be restored by the God of the scriptures is when Christians become doers, not just listeners of the word. The moment you become a listener and not a doer, the moment that you want to compromise the scriptures and continue to make your excuses on why you and I keep habits that are destructive, that we know they are destructive, see, is the moment that we look at the government and say, psh, man, idiots. They're crazy people. Instead of understanding that the transformation of a nation begins by a transformed marriage that produces transformed kids, that reflects on a transformed church, that transforms a community, and eventually those kids, look at me, those kids eventually get into politics, and because of their worldview and their passion for Jesus, they transform politics. Did you know that most of our politicians grew up in church? Did you know that? Many of our politicians in this country have grown up in church. What happens? Somewhere in the mix, something happened. That this passion for Jesus was distorted. This image was compromised. So I'm just asking you today to bring a holistic view of life that says you look at your finances, your sexuality, your emotions, your thinking, your whatever area of life needs to be connected to the doing of the scriptures, not just listening to the scriptures. Today, I just want to invite you to look at what he has to say in conclusion. We're going to close with this. So anyone that wants to wear both coats, anyone that wants to play as a listener versus a doer, is the man that simply looks at his face in the mirror, looks at his face in the mirror, both coats. And the tragedy of looking is that after he looks at his face in the mirror, he walks away, and right away he forgets what he looks like. He forgets that he is supposed to be wise. He forgets that he's supposed to be quick to listen, and he's supposed to be slow to speak, so he's not dominated by anger. That's what he's describing. This is the individual that looks at himself in the mirror and always makes excuse of his condition. He's still a Christian, but he's compromising this whole thing because now he is a listener versus a doer. So tonight or today, Tom Brady is back. Yeah, Patriots fans, anybody here? You know, he's back. And I think he's coming back with a vengeance. I think he's upset. That's besides the point. He's going to be angry. He's going to make the NFL pay for what they did to him, supposedly. But that guy is just amazing. Isn't he just probably one of the best in history? Now, Tony Romo is also good. All right? But here's the thing with Tony Romo, because I like the brother. I like the brother. I like it. I think he's good. I'm honest. I'm not being, critical. But here's the problem with my bro, Tony. He ain't available. He's injured all the time. Now, today, Tom Brady comes back, and I think he's going to crush the Browns. Poor Browns. It's going to be a bad Sunday for the Browns. The Cowboys, there's hope. They're doing okay. We'll see what happens today against the Bengals. But here's the bottom line. The giftedness of these individuals is not good. Not even the salary, and they make millions of dollars unless they are on the field. Is everybody tracking on this? So, the best ability, especially in a sport where it's so physical, in a sport where you have a license to assault people, that's the NFL. The best ability is your availability. Anytime that you and I become simply people who hears the word, but we're not doing the word, is the moment that we become practical atheists. A practical atheist is somebody who believes in God, but does life like he does not exist. A practical atheist is someone who is fully aware that my conduct, my thinking, my feelings are not Christ-like, and is still indulge himself in doing things that we're not supposed to. So what I'm asking you to do is this. Today, God, if you're a follower, He has gifted you. You have been placed, you have been empowered with availabilities. But anytime that you become a hearer of the word and you are not a doer of the word, you are not available. I think Tony Romo is amazing. I mean, the guy is good, especially in the fourth quarter. His stats are just amazing. What's the problem with Brother Tony? He is not available. The problem with many of us is that when it comes to the righteousness of Jesus, the power of Jesus, the presence of Jesus being entrusted to us, we are not available. Can I tell you why we're not available? Please listen to me for a moment, because I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for us right now. It's because when James describes this ability, listen to me. It's not your ability. is Jesus' ability. Why? Because I told you from week 1 that faith is not the ability to trust in God. I know our Bill says in God we trust. I want to change that. I want to say we trust the trustworthiness of Jesus. And I'm saying this because many of us, we read these verses and we want to become doers. We don't want to forget when we look at the mirror. We want to remind ourselves that I know I have work to do and I want to keep on working, and you should keep on working. But at the end of the day, the ability is not your ability, it's Jesus' ability. What your children need is not a better father, a better husband, a better pastor, a better version of you. They need Jesus. But the problem is that Jesus has been entrusted to you. So for me to take away this and put on Christ's likeness is simply understanding that now, since I am trusting not my ability, but the ability of Jesus, I still look in the mirror, but now I look intently. I look with an intensified purpose because look at me, because the purpose of this is not to discover yourself. The purpose of this is to discover God. That's the purpose. See, I'm all for your self-discovery and self-realization and self-whatever. I'm all for those things. And I'm glad you're reading your horoscope. And I'm glad you go, whatever you're doing, power to you, bro. You're not the answer to yourself. It's God. So this man now looks intently for the purpose to find the perfection of the law. The perfection of the God who is perfect, and through Jesus Christ, His perfection has been imputed in me. Please listen to me for a moment. This is the moment where you and I have to fully confess, fully admit that just like the prodigal son, that eventually in the process, he comes to himself. Okay, can you please listen to me? The prodigal son did not come to himself by himself. God brought him to Himself. Stop thinking that if you are wearing both coats, if your emotions are tempering with sin, if you know inside of your mind that what you have been perpetuating is wrong, stop thinking that somehow you're going to turn this thing around on your own just because you know the Bible, you have a degree, you are the son and so, or whatever the case. Look at me for a moment. Coming to the realization of self doesn't happen by myself. Is the man that looks intently, not to find my problems, my issues, how can I deal with this crisis? No, I want to look into the life of God. I want to look into the perfection of God and realize that I cannot come to my senses. I cannot come to myself. I need somebody to bring me back into myself to the point that gives me what? Gives me freedom. What kind of freedom? The freedom, what says? The freedom that I don't have to perform. The freedom that I'm putting my trust on the one who performed, because Jesus satisfies the Father, not me. But once I embrace this reality that He is perfect and the law exists to protect me, not to control me, that the Bible was given to me as a measurement to show me that my tendency is to look at the mirror and simply forget who I really am, and I keep on making excuses. Today I understand that I want to see intently into the face of God, understand that I need to come to myself, not by myself, but by Himself, and now I'm free. I'm free to do what He wants me to do. I'm free that I'm able to perpetuate this into perseverance. I'm free that I will not forget what they have heard. And I'm going to start what? Doing it. I'm going to start doing what I know I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to ultimately that I will receive the blessing of in everything that I do. Some of you are here because you need the blessing of God. Can I just openly tell you this? The blessing that you will receive if you follow these instructions, this is a blessing. At the end, you don't get I'm hoping you do, but you may not get a change of circumstances, a change of marriage, a change of kids, a change of finances, a change of church, or a change of pastor. I know you want to make those changes. But what you get at the end, here's the blessing. You get God. You get God. Because the very same guy that is writing, I told you how he died, right? He died stoned to death. It's not that James finished his whole journey as a pastor in Jerusalem as the emeritus pastor and there was a plaque outside the church. Oh, Pastor James. But remember that no, that was a bad ending. But at the end, regardless of what happens, what you get? What do you get? You get God. That's the blessing. Would it be possible that maybe today is a day where you stop settling for the gifts and for the first time focus on the giver? Would it be possible that for the first time you understand that the blessing is the ability given by God to stop being quick to speak? Maybe for the first time you're going to be quick to listen. And that you understand, I understand, that this experience of fullness of wisdom is manifested on taking off the filthiness and putting on the righteousness.